go there.
Gone. 838,000 Australians having lost jobs, 227,700 in May. As heartbreaking as all of these stories are that are represented in these numbers, the sad truth is these numbers are not surprising in the circumstances. We are very aware of the significant blow that Australians are being hit with through the course of this pandemic. This recession will be written in the stories of those who are experiencing terrible hardship. And these statistics today are a reminder to all, not that we need one, that with all the other noise about whatever else is going on, our task is simple, and that is we must get Australians back into work. We must maintain our focus on them. All 838,000 of them, but we know there will be more in the months ahead. These figures were taken at a time just before actually the opening up of this three-step plan of the states were put in place, and that is of some comfort that would see some Australians finding their way back into employment, but I wouldn't be seeking to overstate that. There is some comfort that can be taken from the fact that we are making our way back and we are on the road back, and that we are taking steps every single day. We can take some comfort from the fact that Australia has put in place the biggest measure of income support the country has ever seen to cushion the blow, but the blow is still devastating and great. And while Australia is doing better than almost any other developed economy in the world, if you've lost your job, that is no comfort. So we can't set our expectations on what's happening elsewhere in the world. Our expectations, the Treasurer and I, together with our government, is getting these Australians back into work, to getting business doors open, to continue to give Australians the hope and the confidence of the road back that we're charting together as a government, together with other governments around the country. These are our dark times, but I can see that ray of light, and I'm sure Australians can too, but we've got to keep moving towards it. We've got to keep working hard each and every day. We will not rest. We are working with some of the biggest economic challenges this country has ever faced. And your government is working day and night to get the balance right, to get the right supports in place, the ones that will work, the ones that will support, the ones that will encourage, the ones that will open business doors up again, the ones that will get Australians back into work. I can't tell you how focused we are on this, and so how disciplined we are as a team. Cabinet met for hours and hours and hours last night on these issues, as we have every week for months, working through the data, and there'll be more data, and we'll need more data before we make further important decisions. And that's how you can expect your government to respond and to behave and to work diligently for you to get Australians back into work. Young people have been most affected in these numbers. But my hope is that equally as the economy opens up, they will hopefully also be the first to benefit from that economy opening up. As retail doors open again, as food courts are open again, as shopping centres are fuller again, we hope to see more of those young people back into that work. But our task will be great, and our application will be there. Our determination will not waver, and the spirit of cooperation and partnership that we have worked hard to build over these many months across governments will continue. and we give Australians our pledge on that. Josh.
Thank you, Prime Minister. These are devastating unemployment numbers. They reveal the true pain and hurt that Australians are going through as a result of the coronavirus. In the month of May, 228,000 jobs were lost. And in the last 2 months, over 835,000 jobs have been lost. These are not just numbers. These are our friends, family members, workmates and neighbours. The participation rate fell to 62.9%, the lowest level since 2001. The underemployment rate is at 13.1%. Female employment fell by 118,000, making up 52% of the jobs lost in the month of May. Young people, youth employment, fell by 103,000, making up 45% of those jobs lost in May. Youth unemployment is now at 16.1%. These numbers reveal the scale of the challenge we face and the mountain we have to climb. And it's why the government put in place $260 billion of economic support. It's why we provided a cash flow boost to business. It's why we provided cash payments to households. It's why we have provided the biggest income support measure this country has ever seen, with the JobKeeper program supporting more than 3 million workers. And it's also why we have started to see signs that the confidence is coming back. Consumer confidence has regained 93% of its lows. Business confidence has regained 70% of its lows. We still have a very, very steep mountain to climb, but as the Prime Minister said, we are working day and night to get Australians back into work.
Prime Minister. Doesn't this give even more justification to why WA's borders should open up?
Every state government, every territory government, the federal government, every local government, all of us must do everything we can to open up our economy and get Australians back into work. There's no surprise in that position from me. That has been my position all along. Subject to the health advice, and let's not us forget that our success on the health front means that we have been able to open up our economy, and we're doing that carefully to ensure that we don't risk a second wave, because a second wave would obviously have a disastrous impact on our economy. I've just met with groups from the entertainment industry in a roundtable meeting with them, and they're obviously doing things very tough, and their challenges will endure longer than most. But a further wave would cause even more devastation to the economy. So it is about getting these decisions right. Health advice on those issues that you raised is clear, and if we want Australians back into jobs, then we need Australia open. Phil.
The numbers, as you said, are terrible but unsurprising. How does it factor into your thinking on JobKeeper and JobSeeker and the future of those programs?
Well, this is important information, and we will have more information on this before the economic statement is handed down in late July. There is other information that we're gathering to better understand what the right balance of the supports are. Supports will be important, and what we're being careful to do is to work through and get this right and get the balance right. I mean, we put these arrangements in place for 6 months to give us that time. We put our supports in place, our income supports, JobKeeper and JobSeeker, and we put that in there for 6 months so we would have the time to properly move to the next step, to change gears again, because anyone who can tell you they know exactly what's going to happen in September in this COVID crisis is having a loan of you. the information you have to be patient for to make sure that you design the next phase of our response carefully. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're carefully doing it. We're getting ourselves the best possible information. And more comes in every day, as sadly this information has. But as you note, Phil, the loss of 227,700 jobs is beyond, I think, some market expectations, certainly. The rate is different again, but that's because of the change in the participation rate. I suppose one of the most upsetting elements, well, there are so many upsetting elements of this, but as I said, while devastated by the number, I'm sadly not surprised. And we will have to brace ourselves, I suspect, for further news in going forward. Catherine.
Prime Minister, just hearing what you've said about you're in a data gathering phase and you're assessing what the best approach is for income support going forward, but conceptually, is the best way of getting Australians into a job, which is your stated objective, is that a wages subsidy that ties a person to a job, or is it topping up income support, topping up the old New Start payment, which is the conventional income support while people find work?
Well, these are the questions, Catherine, and these are the questions in which we're continuing to pull the information together and to get the right balance of all of those decisions. But what we've done is we've given ourselves the time to be able to do that. We've set a timetable to make that decision, and that would mean handing it down in the July statement. And these are the very issues we're wrestling with. I mean, as you know, both with Josh and myself, but I can say for myself, I've dealt with some of the hardest policy problems many of them you wouldn't want to have had to deal with, in many different portfolios, in social services, in immigration, in Treasury, and I can tell you, we have never had to deal with a more complex policy problem than this. And that's why I'm not going to be rushed on it. I'm going to be careful about it. I'm going to take the advice. I'm going to grill the data. I'm going to listen to people, as I've just come from listening to them now again. And we're going to weigh these decisions very, very carefully. Yeah, Greg.
Anthony Byrne has been...
Can we stay on...
Prime Minister,
National Security implications. The economist Warren Hogan, he's told Sky News that we have an effective unemployment rate of 11.5%, which I guess goes with the 830,000 jobs you're talking about losing. Do you agree with that assessment? And just to be blunt about it, what are you going to do about it?
Well, again, like I did when the unemployment figures with the Treasurer last time, I indicated that the unemployment rate, I think, does understate where things are on the ground. That's why I made no reference to the rate. I made reference to the fact that 838,000 jobs had been lost, because that's what's actually happened out there. And how that, adds up in the various, economic measures, there'll be different views on, and so I'm not seeking to have a debate about that. What I know is 838,000 people have lost a job, and that's what we have to turn around. And that's why our JobMaker plan has two components to it. There are the necessary demand supports that we have in place and that we will continue to calibrate going forward, which provide support to the economy now, both to try and keep people in employment, and remembering that keeping people in employment is not just about JobKeeper, it's actually the industrial relations flexibility arrangements that are around JobKeeper that have now enabled employers to keep those people in jobs. But there is also, and I believe this is the point you were making, Catherine, there is the work that we do through JobSeeker. And JobSeeker is the place where, if you have lost your job, JobSeeker is the place where you can connect to other employment services, to training opportunities. And last Friday, when we were the National Cabinet, I may have remarked on that in the press conference. One of the issues I was talking with the states about, and they were raising with me, is how we better integrate state support services with federal support services and connecting them to these people who have lost jobs. And I think that's a great idea, and I can tell you we're working on that right now. So that's the immediate. But there is the longer term. As I indicated in my presentation on Monday, we're looking at around 2 years to get the economy back to where it was before COVID hit it. And let's make no mistake about this. This recession is a product of the coronavirus pandemic. Our economy was strengthening, stable and sound. Coronavirus is the reason people have lost their jobs. And it'll take us, we estimate, around 2 years to get back just to where we were when that happened. And I believe we can, over 5 years, seek to catch where we were planning to be. And that requires the job maker plan of reforms to skills, of investments in infrastructure, deregulating our economy, making sure that our energy system, and particularly we get the gas for a gas-fired recovery which supports manufacturing, our defence manufacturing and defence industry policies, all of this are a part of our job maker plan. Now I've already outlined quite a bit on skills and industrial relations, deregulation and infrastructure. I'll have more to say about energy. I'll have more to say about our manufacturing sector. These are important further bricks in the wall for the government's plan, but what I can tell you is we've got a plan and we're implementing that plan. And it's a strong plan, it's a plan that runs for the next 5 years. And we've demonstrated the ability both to balance the budget and create 1.5 million jobs before, and we can do it again.
Prime Minister, be on the Security Committee, Prime Minister. Should it be on the Security Committee? Do you have faith
Dealing with
in
people
him
who've
to
lost
serve
their
on
jobs today. I will come to Labor's scandals in a second. Yeah.
Prime Minister, it was only a matter of a few days ago that the Treasury Secretary was saying that unemployment would peak at 8%. Is that overly optimistic now, given Warren Hogan's assessment of it actually being around 11%?
I'll let the Treasurer.
Well, we'll update the numbers when it comes to the statement on the 23rd, but clearly the employment market is very, very difficult. And as the Prime Minister laid out, there is a plan to get people back into work, but we're also putting in place sector-specific supports like what we've done in the housing sector, which has been really important in getting tradies back into a job. So we'll update those unemployment numbers on the 23rd of July.
These figures are the worst we've seen in 23 years. You did say you were hoping that young people would be the first to benefit, but then you also said it would be about 2 years before we got to pre-corona levels. Would it be time to potentially consider youth-specific employment measures, things like job path being expanded, things that could really focus on entry-level employment?
Everything's on the table here. Everything's on the table here. On Monday, I highlighted the great risk of if you have young people not in a job before they're between 22 and 25, and how that can lead to a lifetime welfare dependency. Now, that is just not a sickening loss to the person themselves and a great waste of human capacity, but the longer-term effects for the nation are just significant. And it's always been my view, and I've had a great passion when it comes to getting young people into jobs. And that's why, whether it's what we're doing in the workplace relations and the industrial relations area, or the youth path initiatives, or the apprenticeships, I mean, that was one of the first things we did as we went into this crisis, is we amped up what we were doing on apprenticeships. And Michaelia Cash, as Minister, particularly in skills sector and small business, these are things we're focusing a lot of our attention on. So you're absolutely right. You know, getting people back into jobs right across the borders, and we've got to look at everything we can do. Yeah, Shane?
Mr Treasurer, the participation rate's fallen 3 points in 3 months. It's unparalleled. The last recession, it fell by about 1.2 over the entire 3-4 year period. Are there people who have lost jobs in the last few months who will never work again?
We believe we can get all people back into a job, but ultimately, that number that you say, that participation rate, is the lowest it's been since January 2001. But it's the combination of the supply side reforms as well as what we're doing in terms of income support on the demand side.
It's been 2 weeks almost since the Black Lives Matter protests took place. No, but it's like,
I'm happy to go to other issues. Okay.
Are you receiving any information to suggest that there needs to be a slowing of the easing of the national baseline of restrictions that would impact people's ability to get back to work as a result of that gathering?
So far, the news, despite the fact that we've had a number of people who've tested positive to coronavirus who took part in those mass gatherings against health advice, so far, thankfully, so good. And at this point, I'm not aware of any state seeking to ease up on the pace of reopening their economies. But we'll keep watching the data, and they're taking advice from their chief health officers as I am from mine.
Prime Minister, obviously nothing's settled until after the review, but can you confirm that the government's disposition is that JobSeeker can't return to $40 a day in September?
I can confirm that the economic statement will be handed down at the back end of July, and that's where we'll consider a series of matters that relate to the next step in the government's program of support to get people back into work and to give them the support they need to get through the crisis.
On the JobSeeker, are you going to extend further the obligations that people have?
Again, we will be coming back to all these issues as part of the considerations that are currently underway.
Prime Minister, in the last 2 months, we've seen the two worst falls in the unemployment figures on a monthly basis since the records began back in 1978. As of right now, though, how many people would be out of work without JobKeeper payments?
I mean, we've got over 3 million people on JobKeeper.
Yeah, there's over 3 million people are currently getting the JobKeeper payment. But what we do know is that some people are working significantly reduced hours or no hours at all, but are maintaining that formal connection between their employer and employee. Now, some of that is results of the restrictions that are in place, particularly the international borders and the airlines and the like. So it's hard to quantify that at present. What we do know is it's playing a very important role.
Prime Minister, just on that, the underemployment rate, i.e. people would want to work more hours but can't at the moment, is 13%. As you look forward, how are you going to weigh up trying to get people more hours versus people getting unemployed people back into jobs?
Well, this is a very, very important question, John. I mentioned before the importance of the industrial relations arrangements that sit around JobKeeper. Now, businesses are going to have some difficult decisions, and they're going to need flexibility. And that means ensuring that more people can stay in jobs. And if we have rigid systems, then that could see people needlessly losing their jobs. We're not in usual times. We're not in usual economic circumstances. And I don't just mean that because of the recession that we're now in, but it's the nature of the recession we're now in. The nature of the recession we're now in is because of a global health pandemic and a series of artificial restrictions that have been placed on the economy that effectively put a glass ceiling on the economy. And as a result, we need to have arrangements, both in the income supports that the government provides, but also the arrangements that are available in workplaces that can maximise the number of people that we can keep in real jobs going forward. Real jobs going forward, where people are actually able to do work and generate income for the businesses by the work they do. And that's very important. And so, John, that is effectively the issue that not only the government needs to wrestle with, but employers and unions and employees need to wrestle with. And there needs to be more coming together to ensure we can have arrangements which means more people can stay in their jobs, not just because of JobKeeper, but because there's an actual job and because there's the flexibility to enable people to remain in work. I don't want to see people needlessly lose work as a result of those arrangements, and that's why I'm asking, and Minister for Industrial Relations, the Attorney, is also asking and working to try and get the right set of arrangements that can keep more people in jobs. And those arrangements, it's hard to say how long they'd need to extend for because of the nature of the COVID crisis we find ourselves in. But we're all going to have to keep doing things that we're not used to doing in the national interest and in the interests of these 838,000 Australians, and I fear more, who will be added to those numbers in the months ahead.
Do you believe you can get IR reform through the Senate? Do you believe you can get the sort of reform you need through that chamber?
It's a test for all Australians and it's a test for the Parliament, but I can assure you the government will not be failing that test. Yes, sure.
Anthony Byrne, Andrew Hastie said yesterday it's a matter for you and Anthony Albanese, who serves on the Security and Intelligence Committee. Do you have faith in Anthony Byrne as being the deputy chair of that committee, given there were covert recordings out of his office and his phone calls were also recorded?
Well, I would take a recommendation from the Leader of the Opposition as to who the Labor Party would like to have represented on that committee in the first instance. No, let me ask you a question. I would take a recommendation from the Leader of the Opposition as to who he believes should be serving on that committee in the first instance, and I would wait to see what his recommendation would be. That's the fair and appropriate thing to do in the way that the parliament works. The Labor Party nominates who they would have to serve as the deputy chair of that committee. I don't nominate that. That is done by the Leader of the Opposition. So the question is really one to the Leader of the Opposition, but you make reference to these issues. And I note that it is Anthony Byrne who has described this as a corruption investigation. A corruption investigation. That's not what the Liberal Party has called it, or the Nationals. This is what the Labor Party themselves have defined what is occurring in the Labor Party at the moment. They have defined it as an investigation into corruption. And you are right to raise these issues because Australians might be sitting at home and think, Prime Minister, what has this got to do with me and my job? I've lost my job, and that's why the priority in the questions today has been on that. But there are weighty things that are considered by members of parliament, and the national security agenda of the country is one, and where you're raising questions about a member who, by his own admission, is saying that the events that are being inquired into is a corruption investigation, and whether and you're asking whether they should serve on a committee of that seriousness. So there is very serious implications. I am disappointed that the Labor Party is focused on themselves and fighting amongst themselves. The Treasurer and I and my government will keep fighting for jobs.
Just on international.
Are you worried there are national security implications?
Well, the government will continue to manage Australia's national security interests with the strength that we have. It is an important committee, though. It is a very important committee which facilitates on occasion bipartisanship on important national security issues. And it is a very important committee, as indeed all the parliamentary committees are. It has an important role to play. So it really is a test for Mr Albanese as to whether he believes that Mr Byrne should continue to serve on that committee. I'm not going to be... Well, I'm leaving it to Mr Albanese to make a judgment and make a recommendation. He may wish to continue with the current arrangements, but that's really a matter for him. I'm not getting into a speculation game. It's a matter for Mr Albanese to make a judgment on that. Yeah.
Just on international borders and the pandemic, we've heard that it's unlikely that borders will reopen to tourism this year. Is it likely, though, to open for business travellers, and can you give us an indication about how that might work? We've got a trial in Canberra that's about to begin for international students. Do you welcome that?
I do, and we're working closely with the ACT government on that, as we are with the South Australian government, and there are proposals that are coming forward from other states. I'm looking to get our economy as close as back to normal as we possibly can, and to push the envelope in every possible area. And if that means I have the odd dispute here and there with people I work closely with, I know they don't mind, because we're all trying to achieve the same thing. So I will push the boundaries, as I have done for many months now, to get the economy as open as possible and to be innovative and practical about how we can achieve that while at the same time managing the health issues. And so where it comes to facilitating the ability of people to move in and out of Australia who are involved in important employment or work or investment, or whether it's students or others, and I've just had some of those issues raised with me by the entertainment industry and about tours and promotions and artists and so on. These are very practical issues that go to the reopening of our economy, and I can tell you we are fully immersed in all of these decisions. That's why the government is working night and day. That's why I'm not going to be distracted by the many other things that are there, as important as some of them may be. My job is to get Australians back into jobs. That's my pledge. I've done it before and will do it again. Thank you.